It's almost impossible to put into words the kind of pain that comes with losing a close friend, especially when that friend is someone who fought alongside you on the front lines of a war. For this particular veteran, the loss wasn't just a passing sorrow. It was a wound that never truly healed. It had been years since the war, yet every moment of his life was a reminder of the friend who was no longer there by his side. Their bond was more than friendship. It was brotherhood. And in the chaos of battle, his brother in arms was taken from him forever. The memories of those days on the battlefield were still so vivid. The sounds of gunfire, the explosions in the distance, the weight of the helmet pressing down on his head, all of it was something the veteran couldn't shake off. But it wasn't just the noise of war that haunted him. It was the silence after his friend's final breath, the loss of a companion he had relied on, trusted, and fought for. A bond forged in the heat of battle, severed too soon. In the years that followed, this loss became a part of the veteran's daily life. He carried the weight of it on his shoulders, but no one truly understood the depth of his grief. His family tried to comfort him. But how do you comfort someone who's lost a part of themselves? How do you console a man who has seen the worst of humanity and lost a friend in the process? The veteran had long since given up trying to explain. Instead, he kept the sorrow to himself, hidden behind a mask of stoicism. And yet, no matter how much time passed, the pain never faded. It was a part of him now, something he had to live with. But as the years went by, something started to change in him. He began to feel like he was carrying the burden of his friend's memory all alone. His friend's sacrifice, so great, so heroic, deserved to be remembered, but it had been forgotten by most. It wasn't just the veteran who had lost someone, it was a nation that had lost a hero, a fallen soldier who deserved recognition. The veteran felt the weight of this truth in his soul, and he knew he had to do something about it. It was a quiet afternoon when the thought struck him. He didn't want to just carry this grief alone anymore. He wanted to do something to honor his friend, to make sure his sacrifice wasn't in vain. That's when he made the decision to write a letter. But not just any letter. This one would be different. It wasn't going to be a letter to his family or to his friends. It was going to be a letter to someone who could do something about it. Someone who understood the value of sacrifice. Someone who had the power to ensure his fallen friend's legacy was preserved. The letter was addressed to President Donald Trump. The veteran's hands shook as he sat down at his desk. He picked up the pen and began to write, pouring his heart and soul into every word. It was difficult. Writing about his friend, his loss, and the hole in his life was harder than anything he had done before. The words came slowly, each one a testament to the years of pain he had carried in silence. But he knew this letter had to be written. His friend deserved to be remembered, and the only way to make that happen was to reach out to the one person who might be able to help. The letter began, "Mr. Trump, I'm a veteran who served in combat with a man who gave his life for this country. We fought together, we shared everything, and in the end, he made the ultimate sacrifice. He's been gone for many years now, but his memory lives on with me. Yet, despite his bravery, no one seems to remember him. No one honors his sacrifice. I'm writing to you, Mr. Trump, because I need help to make sure he's not forgotten." As he continued to write, the veteran recounted stories of his friend, the way he had been a pillar of strength, always looking out for the others in the unit. How, even in the darkest moments, his friend had managed to offer a smile, a word of encouragement, or a laugh. He described the camaraderie they shared, how they'd survived against all odds, and how his friend had always put the team above himself. And then, when it was time for his friend to make the ultimate sacrifice, he did so without hesitation. "I'm not asking for anything for myself," the letter continued. "I'm asking for the memory of my friend, a hero who gave everything. I'm asking for his story to be told. Please, Mr. Trump, help me make sure he's remembered." The veteran folded the letter, his hands trembling as he sealed the envelope. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew that he had done everything he could to honor his friend. He sent the letter off, unsure of whether it would ever be read. unsure of whether his plea would even be acknowledged. But he knew that he couldn't carry the weight of this grief alone any longer. His friend deserved to be remembered. Weeks passed, and the veteran waited anxiously, not knowing if his letter would ever be read. But then, one day, the phone rang. It was a call he would never forget. President Trump's office had responded. Not only had they received the letter, but the president had read it. The veteran could hardly believe what he was hearing, but it didn't end there. President Trump had been moved by the letter. He was deeply touched by the veteran's words and by the memory of the fallen soldier. He had promised to do everything in his power to make sure the veteran's friend would be honored. The president kept his word. He took immediate action. A public memorial was set up in honor of the fallen soldier, and the veteran's letter was shared with the nation. The veteran, who had lived with this pain for so long, was finally able to find some peace. His friend's legacy was no longer a forgotten story. It had been brought to light, and it would live on for future generations to remember. But that was only the beginning. The veteran's letter continued to echo across the nation, inspiring others to come forward with their own stories of fallen heroes. People from all walks of life shared tales of bravery, of selflessness, of men and women who had sacrificed everything for their country. The movement was born not just from the veteran's grief, but from the collective memory of all those who had lost someone in the service of their nation. What had started as one letter became a nationwide outpouring of gratitude and remembrance. The media picked up on the story, and soon it wasn't just the veteran's fallen friend who was being honored. It was countless others who had fought and died, whose names had long been forgotten. The story became a symbol of recognition and respect for those who had given their lives for freedom. It was a reminder that, though some may be forgotten by time, their sacrifices should never be overlooked. For the veteran, the feeling of having his friend's sacrifice honored was indescribable. It was as if, in that moment, the weight he had carried for so many years had been lifted. But even more than that, it was a realization that his friend was no longer just a memory in his heart. His story had been heard, and it was being passed on through the memorial, through the stories shared by others, through the movement that had grown from one letter. In the years that followed, the veteran would continue to visit the memorial in honor of his friend, standing there with a sense of peace and pride. He knew that his friend's legacy would live on, not just because of the actions he had taken, but because of the love and remembrance shared by a grateful nation. The bond that had been formed on the battlefield was eternal, and it had not been forgotten. The movement continued to grow. As more and more people came forward to share their stories, a network of remembrance began to form. Communities across the country began to create their own memorials, and the fallen heroes were no longer nameless faces lost to time. Their names were spoken, their stories shared, and their legacies preserved. It became a movement of national pride, one that honored not just individual soldiers, but the spirit of selflessness that had defined so many. What happened next was nothing short of a revolution in how the nation remembered its fallen soldiers. It wasn't just about monuments or plaques. It was about the stories, the lives lived, the sacrifices made, and the families left behind. And it all began with one veteran's letter, written with the pain of loss, but driven by the desire for his friend to be remembered. What happened next after that letter was more than just a change in the veteran's life. It sparked a movement that spread across the country, touching hearts and igniting a conversation about the sacrifices made by our brave men and women in uniform. It was a powerful reminder that, even in the darkest times, hope remains. The stories of heroes, like the veteran's fallen friend, must never fade into obscurity. Their sacrifices, often silent but meaningful, must always be honored. The veteran's courage in sharing his pain inspired others to do the same. Veterans, families, and communities came forward, sharing their own stories of loss and heroism. What began as a simple letter became a nationwide call to action, uniting the country and honoring those who had given everything for the greater good. As more stories of sacrifice poured in, it became clear the memory of those who fought for this nation would never be forgotten. The courage of one man had sparked a movement that brought communities together, transcending politics and borders. It showed the power of human connection and compassion. So, let this be a reminder. The stories of heroes must always be told. If you want to see more heartwarming stories like this one, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Together, we can keep their memories alive.